Hello, this is the Torg Eternity Delphi Council Debriefings, where the storm has a name. We are your hosts, Leamon, Jay, and Mark. And today we will be returning to Cyberware and going through some more of the sensory Cyberware things, starting with the auditory stuff. But before we jump into that, I did want to say that with upcoming holidays and stuff, our scheduling might be a little sporadic like they were for the last couple of weeks. We've had things pop up and haven't been able to record. That doesn't mean that we're stopping or anything like that. It just means that we have to adjust schedules, and there might not be as much content coming out, but it will continue. We don't have any plans of going away or doing anything else. So just wanted to put that.
And Fires of Ra will be continuing.
Yes, and we'll continue Fires of Ra. It's just after doing that a couple of times and getting through a couple of acts, we feel that it's nice to go back to something that is useful for both players and GMs. Even though the Fires of Ra and the adventure breakdowns can be good for people after they've played, they are kind of spoilerish for players who haven't gone through it. So we suggest the game masters to listen to those, and then players to not be spoiled, to hold off until you've gone through it. Or if it's something that your group just is like, we will never do this, then you can listen to it. It's fine. So having said that, let's go ahead and jump right into the auditory cyberware. So the first one we're going to talk about is the CyberHam encrypted comms. This is in the main book. In the Cyberpapacy book, it is just listed that it's detailed in the main book. So if you want to get to the breakdown, and it is scrambled and encrypted communication bursts make the cyborg's transmissions nearly impossible to intercept or trace. The signals are routed through a neural interface, so he may listen or speak over the channel without making any real noise at all. So Jay, what are your thoughts of the CyberHam encrypted comms?
This I believe we talked a little bit last time about the TSE HUD or HUD and how freeing that is. And it's this is kind of a very similar one where you can communicate with people silently. So in some ways, almost as good as having telepathy. It doesn't have direct game stats, and it's pretty cheap. It barely goes to your cyberware budget. So it can be a very, very powerful upgrade. That said, you do have to have someone else to communicate with, right? So if you're calling someone else on their phone, or Zuzu, or even their Cyberdeck or whatever, sure, but they are still going to be on their phone unless they also have encrypted comms. So if you have a bunch of people with encrypted comms, you're like nigh invisible. Great, you could talk and not worry about anyone intercepting you. It's very powerful. Otherwise, it's still good, especially if you're the sort of base character or infiltrator and you're the one amongst the bad guys. You could still call your buddy Sniper up on the hill and talk just fine. So this is a really good one, and is kind of my go-to if I have leftover money in my cyberware budget. I'll just pick this up like almost automatically.
So, Mark, what are your thoughts of the CyberHam encrypted comms?
It's almost, I think it's almost a prerequisite. Let me start with this. Jay's completely correct in that it's kind of a if you've got money left over thing from a metagame standpoint. But I'm from Pan Pacifica or Cyberpapacy. This is almost I need to have this because I don't want anybody listening to what I have to say, and I want to listen to what everybody else has to say. It's great stuff to know that you can send a transmission from a game master standpoint, because it's a scrambled and encrypted communication burst. I'm not going to let, unless it would have to be a roll from my villain to be able to try and break this scrambled and encrypted comm. I'm not just giving them because it's like they've got this stuff, they can listen to you, whatever. The player ought to be able to expect that when they have something that says scrambled and encrypted, they can be secure in the idea that when they transmit something from them to someone else, that it is in fact scrambled and encrypted, and the villains don't hear it. And I would make it a difficult role because it's kind of cheesy to spend. You have to spend some of your budget on this, and 500's not. It's kind of it's at the low end. It's not the lowest end, but it's at the low end, and it usually is leftover money. Nobody starts with this typically, but if you do spend it, now you're looking at I can transmit without being snooped on, and so you should allow, in my opinion, game masters should allow that transmission. Now, as Jay pointed out, rightly so, if I'm talking to a Zuzu or someone else's standard cell phone or whatever, that end of it is not encrypted. Now, my transmission to that thing, I would say they can receive it fine, and someone would know they received an encrypted transmission. They don't know where or what. That's they would get that from the Zuzu, but if they respond back, they absolutely 100% know what's being said over that unencrypted other end. So, just because you're transmitting in an encrypted and scrambled frequency doesn't mean that the person that's on the other end, just because they can hear you, can talk back the same way. You have to have equipment to do that. So game masters don't let them, just because I initiated the transmission, don't let the Zuzu on the other end do the same thing. It's not secure back the other direction. Whether or not your players know that, they may learn a lesson the hard way. That's fine, but it's nice to have, especially when you come from a cosm that's a little paranoid, and you should be, because the toaster is listening.
Yeah, I like it. I think that having it be the silent is really good. Otherwise, it's not much different than any other hand-free comm that you can buy in the gear book. I would also do that one-way encryption unless somebody else had something equivalent. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same thing. There might be some other gear or something out there that can encrypt it. And agreeing with Mark, I wouldn't have this thing just anybody can decrypt it. The next thing we're going to talk about actually does do decryption, and then you as a game master or you and your table will need to determine, are you going to make this a contest, or are you just going to say no, the special encryption is better, or what you want in your game. So let's move on to the CyberHam scanner. And that is, the scanner allows a rapid scanning of unidirectional radio signals across all typical frequencies and dynamically decrypt them. Radio signals, including bugs, GodNet devices, communications, are automatically detected and can be recorded and then downloaded to a data chip or other device to be retransmitted or decrypted. So what are your thoughts on the CyberHam scanner, Jay?
So the way it's worded, the scan, like what's in the table is a little bit different than the full description. So
Right.
What it sounds like is that the scanner would automatically detect your burst transmission that you sent with your encrypted comms, but not necessarily be able to automatically decrypt it. So it could save it, and then later when you have time, then you could try to decrypt it, which I would probably make a computer's check or something. Which does bring you to a question that happens with a lot of cyberware in a lot of different role-playing games, because you'll often have cyberware that does a bunch of crazy, cool stuff, and then you'll be like, wouldn't I just have this in a laptop or something? Like, couldn't someone have a CyberHam scanner that was not stuck in their ears? Like, wouldn't there just be a way to do that? So GMs also have to ask yourself, if there's an Inquisitor or Techquisitor, what's the odds that they have access to that? Now, Techquisitor would probably actually have it as cyberware. It's more holy and everything. But your average church police sergeants or some guy in the van might have this. It's plausible. Same with the encrypted comms. There's nothing saying you couldn't just have a physical mastoid comm that's encrypted in the same way. So much like there's smart goggles and things like that as well, don't be aware that sometimes cybernetics could exist outside of it being cyberware. Although it does get a little tricky with the cyber papacy, being that cyberware only really exists because God says so in its current version. So it's not something that always happens. So basically, the CyberHam scanner, it says radio, but I'm going to take that to mean pretty much any kind of VoIP or that kind of communication, cellular, what have you. So it mentions GodNet. I would assume it can also track communication through the plexus or even through the cur or the grid attached to the cur at the very least. So it gives you. It's one of those things that, as a player, unless you're doing a bunch of very intrigue-related stuff, it's not going to be too useful very often. But you do want to keep in mind that it's something other people might have.
Mark, your thoughts on CyberHam scanner?
So, I mean, a simple communication scanner is like ridiculously easy to come by today. Run by Radio Shack or whatever passes for Radio Shack these days, and buy one, and get a Baofeng UV5R and set it up as a scanner. Done. That doesn't mean that you have the ability to understand or read whatever it intercepts and you can listen to. So I'm in agreement that just because you can intercept a burst transmission doesn't necessarily mean that you can decrypt said burst transmission. I would absolutely make that some kind of a skill roll. I agree that the table looks a little. The table seems to indicate that it intercepts and it decrypts it automatically, and the text seems to indicate that as well. I would say that depends on how you want to run communications technology in your COSM. And how you run it at your table, GMs. If you want to make it something, if you want to make this like, the player expectation is that if I'm encrypting it, they got to work to break it. Okay, that's fine. But that's a double-edged sword. So whatever you give the player, you have to make the player do as well, so that when they encounter the villain's encrypted transmissions, they have to do the same thing to decrypt that information and take it in. So they can't have their cake and eat it too, or have their comms and read them too, as it were. You can't let them be rock solid encryption when they're transmitting and automatically decrypt it when they receive it from the bad guys. So you might want to put a little thought into that ahead of time. However, if you want to do it the other way to run it, that's one way to run it. The other way to run it is to take it just verbatim and decide, it automatically, you're running a computer program, because if you don't want to be burdened with it, that's fine. Just, if they received it, if they managed to have the equipment to read it, then this other equipment they managed to have because they spent money on it, then they can decrypt it, and you say that's the expense or the cost associated is enough to resource expenditure to say that you can transmit and receive. That's fine. My only caveat to that would be that as a GM, if you have a piece of information that is a must-know piece of information for your players, that like if they don't know this little snippet of data here, they will never end up at the right spot for whatever your mission requires them to do. Give it to them. I wouldn't make make it an easy or a DN10 or something that even if they botch it somehow, they can get it, because otherwise then you're going to be going, well, I guess we're not playing today. They rolled a 1. That's not, to me, I don't like putting required data behind a die roll, because then put levels of data behind a die roll, but don't put the discovery of the data. Like if this came from Jakarta, and we must be in Jakarta. Okay, well, we know the transmission came from Jakarta. We'll go there and investigate. Well, good success gives you what they said, and outstanding success gives you a pinpoint accuracy. Otherwise, you just know Jakarta. So that's a way to do it, where you get the information and then give them levels of success. It's how you want to run it. Just be consistent is all I'm saying.
I will say that I did miss the part where it says dynamically decrypts it. I was focusing more on the recording it to a data chip to be decrypted later. So it does sound like it does actually decrypt it as it goes.
The verbatim says it's supposed to give it to you.
And it does cost 2 more than the encrypted comms. So I could see that working. But I could also see like a nodder tinkering with it to maybe make it harder to decrypt, you know.
Well, I mean, decryption in the real world, decryption of encoded transmissions is an actual intelligence skill.
Right.
It's not we don't have magical stuff. As far as I know, we don't have magical stuff that just intercepts enemy transmissions.
Well, I would imagine also church police could just send any intercepted thing to Babel Central, and like the full power of the GodNet would be thrust upon it in 2 to 4 business days when they finally get around to it.
Right, and all of that except for 30
tithing,
seconds is, you know, bureaucracy and getting it channeled to the right. And
2 to 4 business days.
20 seconds of it is the actual decryption and sending it back.
That's fantastic, Jay. That's excellent.
So yeah, game masters, figure out how you want to have the 2 Cyberham comms and the scanner interact. The dynamically decrypt them, but then it says downloaded and decrypted. So maybe if you have a Storm Knight who's a nodder who intentionally enhances an encryption or have make a roll, and then somebody else might have to take a little while to decrypt it, you know, you can do it that way. So but I would make sure everybody at the table understands how it's going to work, because then there's going to be disappointment either way. If they think that it's going to work one way and you pull an Uno reverse on them.
Well, if it doesn't, there's got to be a reason. So, I mean, it's perfectly fine for a GM to say, well, yeah, you've done that in the past, but this time it doesn't work. You don't know why. As long as you have a reason. Maybe they you know, if you got the super secret weird science decoder inserted in there, and now you're like, well, I'm from Cyberpapacy, I don't know how a weird science decoder works, and so that's why they're encrypted now, because they're using Nile technology to help them transmit, which is lower tech, but it's weird science, so you're not set up for that on this end. I don't know.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Cyberham Translator. This device is known as BabbleTech and is fitted in the user's ear. It automatically translates whatever the user hears into her native tongue, as long as the language is a modern language native to Core Earth or Magna Warita. So, Jay, your thoughts of the Cyberham Translator?
Like any discussion about language in Torg Eternity, this is wildly variable depending on your table. I would suspect for most tables this is almost useless. But if you are playing a game where languages do matter, then this would be good. And it would also be another thing to spend like your leftover money on. The fact that it's only Core Earth and Cyberpapacy languages does limit it, though. So you can't really use it in the Living Land or anything like that. So yeah, it's probably not going to come up, in my opinion.
Mark, your thoughts on the Cyberham Translator?
Oh no, I think it comes up. I've used it. It comes up when it's somewhere and they speak Spanish and you don't, because you're French. You don't speak Spanish, but you speak French, and they're talking in Spanish. You want to know what they say? Well, okay, now you can. Or you go to Germany, and you know German. It's valuable. I think it's valuable when the GM is. It adds, to me, it adds flavor of the world we know, kind of underlying or overlaid, depending on how you want to look at it, the game system, and it gives it, you know, some reality, or it brings it into, makes it more real, because we can connect with, we all know what it's like to hear a language we do not understand on Earth. We've all lived long enough and heard people talking on the internets or out in the world or whatever. I don't know what they're saying. But this makes it possible to where that common conversation, you now do know what they're saying, and you can, it doesn't mean you can talk back to them, but you can hear them and understand what they're saying, and then that makes half of the conversation possible. And so maybe you can. To me, it's a good tool for role playing aspects of the game, and giving you an option for when they are bringing the setting alive. Instead of just, if you don't want to deal with it, you don't have to. You can just hand wave language in your setting, as Jay said, and it's not an issue, and that's fine. It's not wrong if that's the way that your game is played. It's not less or more if you game another way. It just is another opportunity to bring that some value to that 500 credits or whatever that you're spending on that.
Yeah, I use and I've stated this before, this cinematic logic of a TV series or a movie where wherever you are, everybody speaks your language in bad accents. So if you're,
and loudly
in
and
the
slow.
United States, your foreigners are going to speak with bad English or bad accents, but they'll be speaking English. And the times that the language skill, the linguistic perks and things like the Cyberham translator would come into having a role is when you, the viewer, are watching a movie or TV series and they're speaking in those other languages and we get subtitles. So I see the subtitles being this is needing to have something, but the normal conversations that they're always talking in bad accents, no problem. As Jay pointed out, I really don't necessarily like the fact that it is only modern language native to Core Earth or Magna Horita. I'm pronouncing it classical Latin, not medieval Latin, but I would almost do it as that's kind of what the sanctioned cyberware is that the church presents. For hacked cyberware, for Storm Knights, I would have something as, say, I had somebody from the cyber papacy in my group, and they went to Isle after an act. I would probably say, okay, you were speaking Elven, so your thing figured out Elven. That there's some little program in it that listens, and after a while it can do it. Or if you're especially after the first year,
or the Delphi Council just programmed it that way.
Right, they're gonna be like, here's an update to it, or we're sending you an update. Press the little accept button, on your cyber deck, and here you go.
Cyberham Windows 11. Oh crap!
Right. But that's how I would do it. So, and as everybody said, some people really get into the languages. I have had games where people couldn't talk to other people, and we had little name tags with their names, and then they had the languages written that they could speak, and I even color-coded them, and they're like, oh, who else has blue? Okay, I can talk to one other person, and for those games and those situations, it was fun. It brought out some role-playing. We did some charades. People realized that, hey, making sure we have a common tongue for the group is good. For games where you're just trying to kind of simulate a movie or TV series, it's not necessarily fun in those cases. It might be for some people. It might not be for others. So that's one of those things.
The ironic thing is that using language like that is very flavorful.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you take something like this, you're just stripping it away.
Right.
Right? So it's like they're taking away flavor just to become more optimal.
Right.
So
well, but by the same token, if you keep language as a barrier to certain things because you got to go find somebody who speaks that, then the Storm Knight who did spend their money on this becomes valuable because they have this becomes a valuable perk to have, specifically because you cannot fill that role and you don't have to get pulled through the knothole of I got a connection card, or where let's go persuade some local to be our translator, and do we trust this guy or this gal, etc.
I see this also as just being a good explanation for why so many cyber papacy people speak English.
Right. Or can understand, at least.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of these things, I just look at it as I have Google Translate on my phone, and I use it daily, and it's just you wouldn't want to make something cyberware worse than what you have
Oh
Yeah.
man,
on your.
legitimately, that is the cool. I saw that for the first time doing a form at work, and a guy from Bulgaria had his father in, and his father couldn't read the form, and so
Mhm.
his father pulled it up on his phone, and he started putting his phone over the form, and
Right,
he
and it
started
could do the
filling the form
visual.
out, and I didn't know what he was doing, and I said, "Do you mind if I?" And he said, "Okay, yeah, okay." The thing was translating the image on his phone
Yep,
was
Yeah.
translating it into Bulgarian, which is I think it's a form of Cyrillic. It
it's
had some of
Cyrillic.
those
Yep.
weird characters, yeah, and it was the most amazing thing I'd seen. I was like, "Holy crap, we live in Star Trek! This is the most amazing thing." It was
Assuming
like,
it's translated correctly.
Yes.
okay, that's fair, but me watching it, not knowing anything about Bulgarian, and watching
Right.
the English on the page get translated real time into Bulgarian, and him answering everything the way he was supposed to do, that was really cool.
Yeah. So let's move on to the
Oh,
T.
can I say something
Oh,
about
sure.
Cyberham as a category? Okay, if we got an artist out there that's listening, I feel bad that we don't have like a cyber. Every time I hear the name Cyberham, all I can see in my mind is Spiderham. Okay, so if you don't do a Cyberpapple Spiderham mashup, I'm gonna be disappointed in you. Anyway, moving on.
Okay. So we
Cyberham,
have
Cyberham.
the TSE recorder. This device allows the user to record visual and auditory data by tapping the user's optic and vestibular
Vestibular cochlear.
nerves. Yeah, vestibulocochlear nerves. The user may take high definition still photographs, video, and audio simply by looking and listening. Basically, it's saying that it's using your auditory senses and your visual optic nerves and stuff to make and record video and audio. The implant includes its own storage, and images and the video can be downloaded to other devices, a data chip, or the GodNet via Wi-Fi connection. High-speed photography has a resolution of 1 millisecond with slow motion video up to 1,000 frames per second. So, Jay, your thoughts on the TSE recorder?
It's interesting to note that it's not a visual implant. It's not cyber optics, so it's not physically replacing your eye at all. So this is like an invisible implant. So again, this is one of those things where it really depends on the individual. I think in real life, a lot of people would get this just so they could take as many photos and stuff as they want. But then again, you can't take a photo of yourself, so maybe not. But it would be really handy. But as far as Storm Knights go, like if
Instead of
you're going to
holding a phone up, they'd be holding a mirror
a
up.
mirror, yeah. So like, as far as Storm Knights go, I mean, getting pictures of people, facilities, and things like that could be really good. Um, in theory, because it's using your visual like nerves, it's what you're actually seeing. So if you were looking through a telescope or something, it would get all that detail as well. So really good for like planning like briefing missions and all sorts of things. But ultimately, I think it's another flavor kind of cyberware. It's not going to have direct impact a lot of the time. But if you're going in somewhere and there's a bunch of documents that you actually like physical hard copy documents, then you can quickly get those. And in theory, I mean, it's pretty much supposed to be nigh infinite storage in the cyber papacy. So in theory, everything you have ever seen should be available to you. But God knows how long it would take to sift through all that crap. So I imagine most people just kind of like have like the highlights maybe recorded on a chip somewhere. But this could be the equivalent of a photographic memory, something like that. It depends on how your GM wants to do it. It doesn't actually say that it does that, but in theory, you could be recording 24/7, but then you would have to. It would just take forever to find anything. I would say, especially considering cyber papacy is not the most efficient at these things. But ultimately, if you're not going to allow like a photographic memory kind of power off of this, then it's it's just nice. And that's what all of these 13 cost $500 ones have kind of been.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have to give the edge to the encrypted comms personally, but they're all useful in their own right.
Mark, your thoughts on the TSE recorder?
So I believe it's vestibulocochlear, and if you think about it, I don't know this. The cochlear implant that is it's for it's for their ear, may have something to do with this. I don't understand why this is not standard install. If you take Cyberware, you just get this. If you have anything that's got your eyes involved or your ears involved, hearing or seeing something, then I don't understand why this is just not base model standard. You get it because it ought to be there. If I'm digitally through Cyberware seeing something as technologically advanced as the cyber papacy is, then I ought to be recording it. If I'm hearing anything, I ought to be able to record it. I disagree with the 24/7 idea. I understand where Jay's coming from, where it's like, we got unlimited storage. Okay, fine. This device allows the user to record. Okay, so you can choose to turn it on and turn it off. For me, this has always been the how do we get evidence of wrongdoing or evidence of whatever we did or whatever evidence of whatever we need evidence of kind of thing. If you've got, I always want it as a cyber papal character who's taking Cyberware for that reason. If nothing else, then I can present the Delphi Council with the information. I sit down at the desk where the top secret data is, and I page through it real quick with this eyeball or with this thing turned on. And once I'm done, I don't even have to read it. I just have to page through it really quick. And then once I'm done paging through it, I have the information. I don't even need the widget anymore that I was looking at because I've recorded it. I can hand that off. Okay, does that break the mod because I'm not trying to carry the football around? And it's put at risk, like we talked about in Fires of Ra, where they're trying to get the Waz scepter because I'm not carrying it around. It can't be taken from me now because I've got it recorded. Maybe might want to think about that if you're a GM doing your own material and this item is out there. What happens when your cyber papacy character who has something that they thought was a throwaway implanted just decides to record that paperwork that you worked so hard on that now they just have in their brain? I get why it costs, why you have to pay for it, but it bothers me that it's not just baked into visual or auditory cyberware.
Yeah, I like it, and I think it's funny that, Jay, you started coming up with like all the cool things that you could do with it because it's based off of your eye. It's not a camera, it's just a recording of what you yourself are seeing, and you were like, telescope, or that could be binoculars, or recording documents or hieroglyphics or whatever in front of you for later. And my mind was going the opposite way of like, oh man, if you're colorblind, you're gonna have, you're not gonna get normal. It's going to be that way. Or like for me, if I take off my glasses, then everything's going to be blurred unless it's like that close, 2 inches away from my eye, and things like that. So it could have its good sides. It could have its downsides. If a game master you wanted to play off of that, you might give a character a possibility and say, hey, it didn't record this way because you had said your character is, colorblind or nearsighted or whatever, and
you were drunk out of your mind at the time,
or you're drunk,
or somebody scrambled it.
Or whatever visual and auditory things you were hearing at the time were altered or whatever. So it's not going to be, like I said, it's not a camera, but it's still really cool because unless you have an eye plant that you wanted to look not like a natural eye, nobody's going to know that you have this. And the same thing with audio. It's, nobody's going to know that you're, having a audio recorder with you as well.
I imagine there must be a chip slot in it somewhere.
Or it says
it could say
it says Wi-Fi, so it could be just through Bluetooth.
You're right.
What if somebody hacked you? What if somebody hacked you and implanted stuff in there?
Yeah.
And now you're getting into the Black Mirror stuff.
Yeah, and one thing I did want to state is whenever you're looking at any of this high-tech stuff in any of the books, as Jay also said, it talked about radio signals, but it should be other things. We, as authors, write this using our common now knowledge, and not all of us are communication specialists. And even those that are don't know what's going to happen in the next 10, 20, whatever years. So cyber papacy is way beyond that. That's why I really pushed to not have like actual storage terms put into it. In the original cyber papacy, they used blocks, which was fine because blocks or whatever. But then Pan Pacifica used actual like megabytes.
Yeah,
and a lot
512 meg.
It's huge.
Kilobytes. They're talking about a Nintendo 64, how outrageous tech that is, and we've already bypassed it a quarter of a century now. So just take it as if it says Wi-Fi, it's mainly just talking. You don't have to have a cord. It doesn't mean you have to have a Wi-Fi device. So just take the general and use it as an umbrella term. TSE Snooper. This install allows the character to hear and filter particular sounds and noises. It can pick out very quiet sounds, normal volume sounds at a distance, or pick through chaotic noise such as city traffic or crowded room to listen to particular sounds or conversation. Evidence analysis, find, and tracking tests related to sound are favored. The snooper is also capable of recording the sounds or conversations picked up. So, Jay, your thoughts
it can
on
record.
this?
Yeah, I know. So, I mean, this is like your ye old super hearing, right? The most traditional type. And as we discussed in the previous sensory implant one, I'm kind of the opinion that there should just be a stock sensory like just general, instead of splitting it up into taste, into smell, into hearing and sight. Now hearing and sight are the two that are big enough that perhaps they could stand on their own, right? So being able to hear and listen into people's conversations is a big deal, and being favored is usually good. But not always. Not always. Sometimes you roll like a 13 and you're like, But it does also mention that you can listen to particular sounds or conversations. So if they get a success, I would be very liberal in what I allow with this, because it does cost 16. So it's not cheap as far as installs go. Although if you are making a tracker type character, this is very good. But yeah, the fact that it also lets you record the sounds and conversations, and this has the advantage over the recorder in that it's automatically isolating like a specific conversation or a specific noise. In theory, recording it with the recorder, you might be able to go back in later and try to isolate it with some science rolls or something, maybe. Who knows? Evidence analysis. It really depends on what your GM lets you get away with. But with this, it just automatically does it. So if you're making a perception character, this is a good one.
Mark, your thoughts on the TSE Snooper?
I think from the metagaming standpoint, this is the one that draws the most attention, because you get 3 skills that all of a sudden are favored. 1,500 seems kind of steep for that, but it also seems kind of easy for that because it's 500 per of the 3 skills. So does it balance? Yeah, I guess your mileage may vary depending on how many times you get to use it, but it's super nice to have, and it's very valuable, as Jay pointed out, if you're doing the perception character, or you want to do the tracker, or the person that spots the hidden thing that you need to know. This is really, really good. So I guess the 1,500, 16, however you want to look at the costing, is it's not overly expensive. It's probably right where it should be. I like it. I like it a lot because it gives not just flavorful things, but it gives game benefit, hard determined game benefits that the players. It's not ambiguous. There's no question what it does here. Lots of use out of this one, I think.
So yeah, I like this one. Remember, it is only auditory, so if your evidence analysis, find, or tracking are based off of something else, it wouldn't necessarily apply. There's other things for like smelling odors and stuff like that. I completely agree with Jay's super hearing assessment. To me, this is Superman flying above the earth, and he's tuned in and he's hearing everybody talk.
I don't know if I go that far.
And
Yeah,
he hears Lois Lane go, help me, and he flies down. But something like that where you could filter out. And it could be something that I would allow. Say you're on a street and you're searching for somebody, and you like consciously adjust whatever the things are, and you're looking for that person's voice, or searching for that person's voice, and then it's filtering out other things, or a certain car type noise, or something along those lines.
It's like Daredevil's super senses
right.
that he uses as according to ear.
Right.
Yeah.
So, the next one is similar. TSC Transonic. The TSC Transonic allows the user to pick up sounds with frequency beyond normal human hearing. Subsonic sounds can include those made by natural phenomena, such as avalanches, thunderstorms, calving of icebergs, and tornadoes. Man-made phenomena include sonic booms and explosions. Some animals like whales, elephants, hippos, rhinos communicate with frequencies below 20 hertz. Ultrasonic sound includes those used for navigation by bats and insects. Coded messages using transonic sounds are often used by la resistance. This install also allows the user to see with sound and ignore up to 4 points of darkness penalties. So, Jay, your thoughts on TSE Transonic?
This is such a funny cybernetic. Like, it gives you this giant list of extraordinarily more niche than anything I've ever seen in anything else. Will this ever come up? Coded La Resistance transmissions? Okay, maybe. It's like, okay, this stuff will never happen. Oh, and then just ignore darkness.
Right.
Like one of the best possible things. That said, it costs $5,000, so that's your half of your initial budget or your entire second budget. So it's pretty significant. But ignoring 4 points of darkness penalties is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird way to go about it. It does essentially make you Daredevil, like so you can see what's around you purely by sound. There is the standard issue of any kind of see in the dark where it does not get rid of Cloak of Darkness that you do have to account for. You don't have to worry about flashbangs or anything like that, though it doesn't mention it. I would assume that like sonic attacks should probably do more to you somehow. That would be up to the GM's discretion. My biggest issue with this, though, is when you look ahead to the Ledos, Latres, and all them coming up, I kind of don't see why this doesn't also do what they do in a way. But you do have to remember that it's just like for a game mechanic reason that these things have been separated. So $5,000 for ignore 4 points of darkness. Is that better than $3,000 to ignore darkness from the Bell Spectrum Eyes? But then the Bell Spectrum Eyes have a... are obvious, right? Like you've got big old cyber eyes, and this is not obvious. So I don't know if I would ever really go for it, to be honest, unless you just have a burning desire to be Daredevil.
Mark, your thoughts on the TSE Transonic?
I do have a burning desire to be Daredevil. Because it costs 5,000, I might be liberal in my interpretation of that last bit there, where this install also allows the user to see with sound and ignore up to 4 points of darkness penalties. So I might go to the point where this does what Daredevil does with his ability, with his radar sense, in that you can see. You have this 360-degree radar created image in your head of your surroundings out to a distance, and it's like walking around, and you can do that with your eyes closed, or if you happen to be you're playing a blind character, that's fine. Then you are always in level 2 darkness, shadow, but you can see. And so you can interact with things around you. Now that does continue to carry some handicap with it, though, because that radar sense can't tell you what the color is. Mm-hmm. So you can't figure that out. Unlike Daredevil, you don't have that unless you take other things, which we'll get to eventually. You can't feel and read stuff with your fingers, but you can still see. You can fight. You can do all of the things that you could do with your eyes open or with fully sighted. You're just at a -2. But you've got that 360-degree radar sense going on, which is different from us, the sighted people, where we just see what we see, out to our peripheral vision, and then everything outside of our peripheral vision we don't see. So, is that better or worse? I don't know. Is that cool flavor for a character? Yeah, I think that's really cool flavor for a character if your GM allows it to be played that way. I don't know that that's how it was intended. I read it that way, and I find it interesting that, as Jay pointed out, you've got all this little super interesting flavor, hyper niche, whatever, and oh, by the way, here's this great big cool thing in this little big sentence. So how do you want to, GMs, how do you want to do it? If you got a character or you got a player that wants to play Daredevil, maybe you let them.
Yeah, I think this is a neat alternative to the normal night vision type cyberware. There's the good parts and the bad parts. The good parts are, since this is sound, things that even prevent night vision would work with this, I would say. Like, it's either Mage Dark or the upgrade to that.
Mage Dark, yeah.
The low light vision or those penalties still,
or even invisibility
apply. Or invisibility. This would bypass that, and it wouldn't remove the cloak of darkness penalties. But in Aurora, you're going to have lights go out, and people are not going to be able to see that normally can see. This, I would allow that because it's not visual. But as Mark said, you're not going to be able to get color. You're not going to be able to actually read print on things, and I would even go so far as it's not going to allow you to see through transparent materials like glass.
That's a good idea.
Or
glass is a wall to you.
Yeah, glass, plastic, all of that is solid to you. So it has some good sides and some bad sides, and I think that's a cool way to differentiate it. So yeah, I think it's viable. It does cost a little bit more, but it's going to be used in a little bit differently. And as Mark says, you kind of get a 360-degree sonar bat type thing. So that's kind of cool.
The thing it doesn't really mention, which some people might really wonder, is the range.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. If you're hearing like icebergs and stuff, I don't know. That's just like weird, but yeah. So let's move on. That was the last auditory. Now they kind of group the last three: olfactory, which is sense of smell, taste, and tactile feeling all together. We have the TSE Bloodhounds, which is a nasal implant that can analyze the components of any gas or vapor inhaled by the user, evidence analysis, find, or tracking test. So the same three for the audio one. This is the olfactory one, are favored involving gases and scents. So, Jay, your view on the TSE Bloodhound?
This costs 2K, so 17. So it's fairly expensive for being pretty niche. And this is again one of the things that I was talking about. I would probably package it as just a sensory package. That said, as it stands right now, since it costs a fair amount, I would let it do exactly what it says. It will analyze the components of any gas or vapor inhaled. So you will know what it is. Like it would give you an evidence analysis finder tracking favored bonus if you're doing something with it, but I would just let it tell you what it is. Like no roll, you just know. Like otherwise it's kind of too expensive.
Mark, your thoughts on the TSE Bloodhound?
I don't think I'm ever taking this as a player. It's too expensive. For what it does, it's too expensive. Does it give you, does it give you neat, it does give you favored on some skills? Yes, it does. In a very select, narrow band of circumstances. It's called the TSE Bloodhound, but you still have to make a roll to follow a scent trail. You're favored, but I can follow the scent trail if I have tracking or evidence analysis in various ways. There are other ways to skin that cat that I don't spend 2,000 on to get there. I'm in complete agreement with Jay. If you take this for $2,000 and you encounter a gas or smell or scent of any kind, you just know because you paid a lot for it and you should get something for it. So the evidence analysis kind of thing in this pales a little bit if you interpret it that way, because now you're favored on a gas that you're going to do evidence analysis on, and Jay and I both just said, just tell them. And so what's the point of evidence analysis on a gas if you're just going to tell them? But you paid $2,000 for it, so I would feel kind of cheated. That's why I'm not going to take it. It doesn't accomplish $2,000 or 2,000 credits or whatever worth of cyberware for me.
Yeah, I think it's neat. I would also do the anything gaseous, you would know what it is. Carbon monoxide, boom, don't go in there. You'll pass out. Carbon dioxide, oh, this is fine. Normal air, this has a bit of chlorine in it. Oh, this is smoky, it has some ash. Whatever you might have another character roll, you just tell this player what their character, senses.
The femme fatale is disguised, but I know exactly which one it is because I can smell her perfume.
That exact
know exactly
cologne.
Which one it is, or the dude with the exact cologne.
Right.
Yeah,
that whole thing, you got all that. But yeah, otherwise it's very niche and more than what the other.
And you do have to breathe it in still.
Right. A lot of these are you have to use your sense, and there's no protection against said thing unless you get something else. Which that something else is the TSE clamp. The clamp is a safety device that automatically closes off the user's nasal passages when hazardous substance is detected. The gas is then filtered through the sides of the nose and allows the user to breathe normally. The character is immune to attacks with gases that involve inhalation, like chlorine, knockout gas, or poisonous vapor. It has no effect on neurotoxins. So, Jay, what are your thoughts of the TSE clamp?
The bane of the Nile Empire. I have seen so many people not wreck an adventure or an encounter, but just mess up a DSR involving poison gas, and the GM be like, "What?" This is probably one of the most. It depends where you are, but in Torg, poison gas has a tendency to find you. Not so often poison, but just inhaling bad things, it happens. So this, I think, is worth 2,000, and it doesn't come up very often. But when it does, it saves your ass so hard that it is worth it. Now, personally, I would have probably had the Bloodhound be a prerequisite to this. Because how is it...
part of it.
Well, yeah, I would have maybe made the Bloodhound cost 500, and then require that and then make this cost like 1,500, so it would still like cost 2K, but it gives you kind of a way to go up into it. But yeah, like this one's really good, especially if you're paranoid.
Mark, your thoughts on the TSE clamp?
Yeah, poison gas is in the Nile Empire. Poison gas isn't poison gas like it is in Pan Pacifica. Poison gas in the Nile Empire doesn't mean everybody's going to die, because Nile Empire, law of inevitable return. It's still poison gas, right? It's a death trap, or whatever it happens to be. But for me, the TSE clamp is another one that I'm like, I don't know that I'm ever going to take this one. That it's 2,000, and that's a lot that I'm not going to get to take advantage of as often as Bell Snipe or Bell Scan, or almost anything else we've talked about so far. Now, I like Jay's. I love Jay's idea of making the Bloodhound a prerequisite for the clamp. I would say Bloodhound and clamp are the same thing combine them for 2,000. That, to me, that's worth 2,000, because you get all of that in the package. I don't get why they're saying neurotoxins don't count when you've got a filter in place that you're not actually breathing anything. You either are breathing it or you're not breathing it.
Well, it's touched your skin at that point.
Well, okay, maybe. But a neurotoxin, then we're not talking about a gas, we're talking about a vapor, and that's different.
Well, that's probably more of a distinction than they were thinking.
But that's the distinction they're making. But anyway, it's either or. I like the clamp. I like both of them. I like to see both of them together.
Yeah, I think this is, as Jay said, it could save your bacon, save the group. You don't get knocked out or poisoned or whatever. This would be something that a normal, what I would call the normal guy who's getting cyberware for combat and fighting wouldn't do. This would be something that you are going to be just I'm defending against all the bad stuff that might happen. The paranoid type person who's going to get this and the other senses type thing. Whereas something like the comms and those, they might be extras. This will be something that it's a character concept. This is for those people who want the character concept to have this. It's not just for I got some few extra credits sitting around, because it's more than a few extra credits.
Don't forget also, you can make your own gas.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like you can run into melee with a bunch of lurks and drop a tear gas grenade, and you'll be fine. And they're all screwed. So that is also an option as well.
Yeah, the prevent your own stuff from harming you.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the TSE Les Dos or Les Dos. I don't know how.
Not the taster.
We're not getting the taster.
I see that at the end. So.
Really?
Page 34.
Oh, I'm going down the actual descriptions.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, we'll get to the taster.
No, it works. That works.
But, the Les Dos. This extensive series of implants have pressure and electromagnetic sensors located all over the body and enable the user to detect nearby attacks from any direction. The user experiences the detection of an attack if their skin is crawling. So it's your spider sense. The user is immune to being flat-footed, and then it says melee attacks, but I guess is immune from being flat from melee attacks. So Jay, what are your thoughts on TSE Les Dos?
Les Dos. It seems expensive for what it is. It's 5,000, but not really when you stop and think about it. Because assuming you have the Les Dos and Les Tres, that basically just makes you immune to being surprised, which is in itself a whole perk otherwise. For, I think, darkness. I can't remember what category it's in. So it makes sense that way. It's just kind of weird that they split it up into two things, but I guess if you're a melee character, okay. I think it's interesting. This whole idea of having electromagnets in your body is something that people have done in real life, apparently. Real life cyborgs, and they would embed electromagnets in their skin, and it actually did kind of give them an extra sense. And then when they had to take them out because they became infected, they felt that they were actually missing a sense. So I think it's very interesting to have this. But this is the thing I was talking about. Why do you not get this with transonic as well? Like, shouldn't you be able to sense someone coming up on you since you're sonically able to detect everything around you? So you just have to remember mechanically, this is just a different thing. The fact that it's just melee on its own, I think, is a little bit weak. I don't know if I would take just this, but the combination, which we'll get to in a sec, I think is fine.
Mark, your thoughts on the TSE late dose?
Yeah, I like it. It's got some weaknesses though in the fact that you've got metal parts all in your body, so you now have to worry about, and this is outside the text, but you got to worry about electromagnetic interference. Can it be interfered with from a radio standpoint? What other things can be done to this because you've got these detectors in your skin. Which means you've also got some kind of a network of either wires or wireless network running at the same time. It is perplexing about how this doesn't work with transonic or doesn't have. There ought to be some synergy you get with transonic and this. I think I like Jay's idea that this ought to be combined with that as an explanation for how transonic works. Because the minute you start talking about transonic, my mind is, well, okay, there's an emitter and a receiver somewhere, and so where are those so that you can see these things? Other than that, it seems overly expensive for the simple thing that you get. Because how often do you surprise how often are your Storm Knights flat-footed? I don't know that I've surprised Storm Knights that often because Storm Knights tend to be very savvy. So you've just paid half your budget or more to avoid the once an act or once an adventure surprise. That seems heavy to me.
Yeah, my main, I would say, gripe or whatever on this one is, or my main nitpick, is the flat-footed. It is extremely rarely comes up, and this is only against melee attacks, so not even...
Especially in melee attacks.
It's something that I remember, it's in the core book, what flat-footed is, but you always have to it's almost like a niche vulnerable. And it's not very just vulnerable. Very, or niche very vulnerable, but it's not a just... Things that affect people that are flat-footed don't affect people that are very vulnerable. And it is such rarely used. I remember specifically myself coming up with spells or miracles and stuff that would make people flat-footed so that those who had the anti-flat-footed stuff, like I believe there's a darkness power that if somebody is flat-footed, you get something, but that was never occurring in adventures.
Well, you're flat-footed if you're grappled, if you're restrained,
right? But I mean, it's just so many.
It's still, but it's so niche.
It's not.
My
common.
group must do a lot more ambushing and getting ambushed than you guys.
So I guess your mileage may vary, but as Jay did say, when this is late dose, and then when you get to late tray, then they kind of the worth it kind of gets more. So
yeah.
The next one is upgrade to the late dose implant, allowing an even more sensitive but still split second detection of ambushes. The character is immune to surprise, but this does not prevent allies from being surprised. So, Jay, what are your thoughts on this one, Late Trace?
Yeah, so that's what you're actually looking for, is just immune to surprise, no qualifiers. Just you, though. So that's what I was mentioning. It's basically, at that point, it's an entire perk. to get this, and is that going to be worth it to you? I guess it depends on your game. I usually do play a lot of the like Wandering Monsters or those cards. I will often surprise the players with them, especially in Orosh. So my players do get surprised from time to time. I'll usually have them do a find roll, and if they botch it, which they sometimes purposefully don't succeed, because the harder the fight, the more possibilities you get from it, right? So maybe that's it. Maybe my group just likes to farm possibilities more than others. But yeah, so I personally would never take this. But I guess if someone really wants to, if someone really hates being surprised, then okay, there you go. It's as good as some other niche perks.
So, Mark, your thoughts on TSE Late Trace?
So, as a starting Storm Knight from the Cyber Papacy, setting up your abilities outside the realm of discussion, you're a normal Joe, except that nobody ever jumps out and scares you. That's it. That's all this does. And you've spent your entire starting perk budget to get that way. There's nothing else special about you. Nothing ever scares you, because you can't be surprised within 100 meters, which is a long way. I mean, you're standing at 2 football fields in any direction, in a football field in any direction away from you. Nothing surprises you. Like, oh yeah, I saw that coming. Oh yeah, I saw that coming.
That is pretty far.
I mean, that's a long way away, right? But that's it. You don't do anything else, and you can't transmit. That doesn't help your friends around you. So you're like, oh man, this is gonna suck for Bob. Here we go. Yep, it sucked for Bob. Didn't suck for me, but Bob's. No, I'm sorry, man. I would have told you, but yeah.
Why didn't you save Bob?
Why didn't you save Bob?
You got to go first.
So I mean, but it doesn't. You can't that doesn't translate to anything for your group. Mm-hmm. You spent your 2 starting perks, and nothing helps your buddies. I mean, you get to go. You don't lose your turn, but I mean, that's too steep. That's too steep a price for me. I'm not paying it.
So I'll add to Jay. This is your full funds are going to this. It's your perk. Add it with the next one, Le Quattro.
That's even worse.
Now you're talking 2 starter perks worth, of stuff. Your 10,000, and then either your 8,000 or your 5,000, wherever you get it, because this is another 5,000, I believe. Yes, 5, 5, and 5. So you're talking about 15,000. So my thing is, if you don't want your character ever to be surprised, if you just played some Torg and you're always surprised, and you were so annoyed, and you're like, I'm never being surprised again, then you get this. Otherwise, you're
afraid of lurks. Yeah.
Right. Or, you don't really worry about it unless you're like, oh, well, I have a bunch of, XP and just a couple of perks, and I'm not sure what to do. Sure, this sounds like fun. But if you really want to go for it, and get the Le Quattro, this is a further upgrade to the TSE Le Dos suite that can detect any movement within 100 meters of the character. If motion is obscured by walls or other hard substance, the range is decreased to 20 meters, which is still pretty good, detecting things behind doors and stuff. The nature of what is actually moving can't be determined, so if it's behind the door, you don't know it's, a Jiangshi or a person, but you can probably get its human size. I would allow that as a game master. Only its presence. The information can be displayed on a handheld device, HUD goggles, or Cyberham HUD, which to me means you can transmit that to others, because it's not saying necessarily, because you wouldn't necessarily need it yourself because you know what's going on. So
this is an alien's motion tracker.
So that's literally what I was going to say.
Yeah, so being able to display it, I would say that means if your friend has an HU, a HUD or some type of handheld device, goggles, cyberham, you could feed it, you could send them your feed, and then everybody would be able to get that. And I would go further, because this is a steep cost. I would say then everybody gets the same benefits of los dos, or les dos, and les tres, or trace. Again, French is the language I don't understand. I would just allow all of them. Everybody gets it. This is what your thing is. But that is me. So, Jay, what are your thoughts on Les Quattro?
I mean, not that a Cyberham HUD is even a thing. I mean, there's the TSE. But
Cyberham.
So yeah, this is. I was like, look, I'm never taking this, but I could see why someone who just does not want to be surprised would take it. But at this point, I don't know who would take this for the amount that it costs. As Mark said, it is literally just the motion scanner from Aliens.
Mm-hmm.
It's just little dots coming up, and you can't even tell what they are. And if you stop and think about what a horror show you must be living in to be able to sense every single moving thing within 100 meters in every direction, 20 meters behind walls. So you're just constantly living these pings around you everywhere, which is, again, pretty much what Transonic was saying. Why doesn't this help you see them? I don't know. Now, rules as written, it does not do what Leamon said about granting it. So, I mean, that's definitely a GM thing. Like, personally, I don't know if I would allow that, except for the fact that this costs so friggin' much that I don't see the problem with it necessarily. That means they have to already be looking at the HUD, I guess. But yeah, this is like the niche of niche. Well, actually, no, there's still one more that's even more niche, but we'll get to that. But this has the combination of being super niche and ridiculously expensive. Not like, just if it was by itself, it would be ridiculously expensive. But the fact that you have to have already gone through 10 grand to get here, this is no bueno for me.
And Mark, what are your thoughts on the TSE Les Quattro?
Yeah, what he said. I mean, I love your idea. I think that if this got rewritten to be what you said that it should be, if you can connect to other, you got a network of people that you could connect to through HUD or whatever, then yeah, they all get the same bonuses you get. That to me would make this person a very valuable skill for an infiltration group or a combat group that's going into a firefight or knowingly entering a combat zone. Absolutely, we're dragging him around. Whoever this guy is, we're bringing him with us because we know everything. Every target within 100 meters, we know where they are. Yeah. So, but if it does, as Jace rightly pointed out, that is not what the rules as written reads, and as it's written, never taken this.
Yeah, again, I would, just because of the cost, and there's not something saying it can be, it's limit the display not being limited. I would allow the trace and the dose to be given, just because I think then, if you started with this as your first cyberware is 10,000, your second one's either 8 or 5,000. This is costing your 15 for your starter character. Now the entire group has potential of not being surprised, and that could be worth it to you.
Which ironically could be adventure breaking.
Right.
Yes. It could be a game changer, literally.
But that's my thoughts, and I probably wouldn't go that way with spending that much. That would be again, a very niche character concept of we're not surprised. and I don't know. Some people might consider it fun. I think sometimes being surprised as a player, even if my character doesn't think it's fun, could be fun. So then the last one of these I have for the sensory are the TSE Taster.
Oh, there's one other still.
Or is there? And then
it's going to be your favorite.
Oh, yeah, we talked about this one before. Yeah, that was in the other book. So let's do the Taster.
Okay.
The Taster implant allows the user to analyze liquid or solid substances, and this is the taste version of getting your evidence analysis, finding, and tracking using taste being favored. The device includes storage that records tastes and analysis for later reference.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jay, what are your thoughts on the TSE Taster?
Basically the same as the Bloodhound. I'll just let you know what it is. If it's poison, sorry. As a side note, not in Torg, but I had a very similar cybernetic to this in a game of Cyberpunk I played once with my private investigator. And this was a game that all of us made characters that were specifically designed like with our niche specialties as players to just wreck our ref. And we did a heist, and I actually did get to use it by scraping the walls of this art gallery and tasting it so I could identify what kind of security gas they used when they ran tests. I think we ran some booster ganger in there to set it off, and then we could find out what kind of gas it was, and then so then we would inoculate ourselves against it. And so it may not seem like this can ever be useful, but you can find a way as a player to make this useful. I don't know if you could find a way to make it $2,000 useful. That's the thing. But again, I just think there should be a general sensory one for touch. And ironically, there is no touch one, right? Like there's nothing for feel.
That one they try to make is a feel, but it's really...
Yeah, so I think like having feel, taste, and smell all wrapped into one would work fine. Otherwise, yeah, I don't know. I think I said this last time, but I remember in the classic Torg Cyber Pepsi book looking at all of these and thinking, oh yeah, that's cool. You could do all this stuff. But back then it was just you paid money for it and you only had to worry about cyber psychosis, like humanity loss. Whereas here it's tied to perks and you only get so much of an allotment. So it's like, how much can you waste on this kind of, frivolities?
What's your ROI on that?
Yeah.
Okay, so what about you, Mark? TSE Taster.
A thought occurs to me about Taster and Bloodhound and the ones like those two that, and this is, we've said a lot of things that this is not how it's written, but if you wanted to let it play this way, you could, in this particular episode. So players, if you're like, oh, that's cool, I want to do that, make sure that you talk to your GM before you take these things and just expect it to work that way, because if your GM is like, no, that's not how it works, then you're going to be very disappointed. That's right. You point the finger at this podcast and the GM says, well, it's my Cosm, it's not their Cosm, it doesn't work that way. So make sure it works the way you want it to before you take it. But that said, you could take the fact that you've installed this cyberware for your olfactory or your tactile or whatever, your as a way that it's set up so that it can sample the item without you ingesting it and becoming affected by it. So the poison, I run my finger through the stuff and put it on my tongue, and I haven't just poisoned myself to figure out that it's poison. I mean, I can do that without any of this cyberware, okay? But that to me makes sense, that if there's a gas, I can sample it without inhaling it and know, oh, you guys don't want to go in there. That's a bad idea, right? You can, as Jay said, you run your finger over it and taste it and go, oh, that's this thing, and you didn't just knock yourself out, because I'll, wake me up in 30 minutes after we'll figure this out. With all that said, just like the Bloodhound, it's niche. If you build a character that does this stuff, then it's cool to you, and if you're not going to build that character, I don't think you're ever going to take it.
Yeah, whenever I read something like this, where it's the taste of allows the user to analyze liquid or solid substances and determine their components. I just like have flashbacks to geology where we would taste rocks.
Lick those rocks, baby.
Like, well, you would honestly, you would lick a rock, especially if you couldn't figure out if it was shale or shale, because the slate is smooth and the shale is gritty, and it was like your fingers really couldn't feel it. Your tactile touch there, but your tongue being a little more sensitive could. So you'd see all these, geologists out in the field. Wow. and go along with that, it's like, the poison frogs that, let people go off into Never Land, things like that. This is one that how we were talking about the Bloodhound and the Clamp probably would be nice to have either sequentially at the total cost of one of them. This probably wouldn't be bad to have, I think, as Mark said, also a protection from it. So,
I'm actually surprised there isn't like a Clamp variant for ingested poisons to make you like throw it up or something.
So that's just something. If you want to add that as a game master, either add it into this or add your own next step to it with a reduced cost. I see no problem with that. So then we had the one last one, which was the Cyberham fingerprint mimic. I would say go back to our last episode that we did about this. Let me pull up. I had it pulled up earlier, but
it's like 2 ago, right? Or 3 ago.
3 ago. But let's, because I went off on a whole little rant because I understand when any game starts.
We've triggered Leamon.
Well, it's for anybody. Anybody can have a game that will at some point encounter something that they're a specialist with, whether it's their actual occupation or they just know it so much because that's their main hobby, or they've done a lot of research or whatever, and then you go, what's the purpose of this? So the fingerprint thing is you get one fingerprint for the thing. One out of 10. And it's not even including your palms and your feet or your other ways to identify you. And so I just had a little rant about it. It's on this channel. There we go. It was 3 episodes ago, number 80, visual sensory implants. So you can watch my personal rant on the fingerprint. I personally would just wrap this up completely with all friction ridge skin can be changed. If you had somebody else in a database, you could mimic theirs. You could just make it a random pattern and leave it at that and not have to do this one finger per thing costing you 10,000 just so that you can alter your fingerprints.
Just so you guys know why this is a rant for Leamon, he works in a crime lab, and this is his specialty.
Right, I'm a latent print examiner. I've done 10 prints also, and I do palm prints, and we can do feet prints, although footprints aren't very common. People usually don't walk around barefooted, but it
just
happens.
Babies.
Yes, so, although sometimes the one place, just for a real life thing, the one place that you will find footprints are the windshields of cars, because a lot of people in that passenger seat or whatever just like taking off their shoes and just putting their feet and resting their feet up on. I'm not trying to be like gross or anything. I'm just talking about riding down. You see a lot of people just put their feet up on windows. So that's kind of a thing.
The more you know.
The more you know.
Jay, did you have any thoughts on the fingerprint mimic that fools fingerprint scans?
Oh, I think we said it last time. Basically, it should be a general cover all the bases kind of thing instead of just each. Because like, how much do fingerprints even matter in the cyber papacy? They're tracking you with everything else, anyways.
Right, and we kind of why we talked about that earlier is because we kind of put it up to the retina mimic, where then there's iris, and it's all biometrics. So,
Yeah.
Yep.
So, having said that, thank you very much for listening to this. We'll get back into Fires Raw the next episode. And otherwise, you can write us at torgdcd@gmail.com. We'll read your emails and we will answer them. We do have an email on the back burner. We're waiting to get past what was discussed in Fires of Raw, so we'll have that for the next episode. And otherwise, until next time, we hope you have fun in your own Cosmverse. Bye.